get a few questions about how I edit my photos. I like to use Photoshop. If you have Photoshop, you can follow along or take bits and pieces of what I do and implement in your process. You can also do similar things in Lightroom if you have that as well. First thing I'm going to do is duplicate our layer after I've imported it into Photoshop. Never work on the background layer, always duplicate so that you have the original photo there just in case you need it, or in case you mess up. And I'm just going to be editing some of the blemishes. I always start with getting rid of blemishes before I do any color edits. I like to use the spot healing tool. Spot healing tool is very intuitive. You can adjust the properties of the tool. You can adjust the size and the hardness. I also like to keep mine set to proximity match. Click on areas that you want adjusted. It's great for small blemishes. I also like to use the clone stamp tool. The clone stamp tool is a little bit more precise. It copies areas from one area of an image to another. And you can do this by selecting the clearer part of your skin and painting over the blemish. You can select the clearer or whatever area of the skin you want to copy by pressing or alt-clicking. I like to alt-click around the blemish and then I paint over the top of the blemish. And I do this a couple times, sampling different areas. So above the blemish, I sample below the blemish, to the right, to the left. I just paint over it until I get a seamless blend. But yeah, we can already see a difference there. Looks a bit clean. It looks smoother there now. And that's usually what I go for. I don't really like to blur my skin too much. Next step is going to be converting this layer, this background copy, into a smart layer or a smart object. The smart object allows you to add filters on top of that layer without actually destroying the original image or the pixels there. You can turn the filters on or off and it won't affect the original image. So right click and turn it into a smart object. And after that, you're going to go to the top left menu and you're going to go to filter, and then you're going to click on camera raw filter. After we press camera raw filter, you'll see a window like this open up, and this is where we'll be doing most of our major color edits. Usually using the camera raw filter is safe for, raw photos, but I like using this for standard selfies too. It's just an easy tool, and we're going to be using basic through split toning. I don't really touch optics or geometry or effects or calibration. Don't know what those are. So we're just going to shoot straight into basics. So under the basics tab, there's a lot of different options here. You've probably seen these same options on other photo editing apps. I think Lightroom has something similar too. But I start with adjusting the temperature and the tint. I like pushing everything to its extreme when I don't really know what to do, just so I can see what each option does to the image. I always like turning up the purples and making the image a little bit less warm because we're using fluorescent lighting mainly in this photo. So I turn it towards the blues and I turn up the purples. You can also toggle your view with this button on the bottom right. There's two buttons here that you can use to toggle your views. You could press the square just to get a before and after side-by-side image. I think this is already pretty decently exposed, so I'm not gonna mess with that too much. I always like making my blacks blacker, darkening all the black tones in the image. But that's just my preference. Some people actually like their blacks a lot lighter. I just like mine to be darker. You can copy the same values, but honestly, it just depends on your image. It's probably going to be different values for yours. I always like to turn up the whites too, make my whites a bit whiter. It also helps with the highlights as well. The shadows are a little bit too dark since I turned down the black, so I'm just going to make the shadows a bit lighter, just so the image doesn't get too muddy. Sometimes I mess with the highlights, sometimes I don't. I really don't like to touch the contrast. Like, Using blacks and whites and adjusting shadows and highlights does enough for me. When I turn up the vibrance as well, I like having strong pops of color. And now you can see in the before and after, less hazy. It's not, you can go and mess with the curves if you'd like. If you're not familiar with curves, I would say leave it alone. This messes, or this adjusts the lights and the darks, the value of the image. Not doing too much there. I'm just gonna move on to color mixer. This is my favorite part. I don't know, I think I just like seeing the bars here, but you can basically affect specific colors in the images. So you can affect the reds, oranges, yellows, greens, blues, purples, magentas, and you can slightly adjust them to a different hue, a slightly different hue. I like making my reds a little bit redder. This is going to adjust the eye makeup and some of the skin as well. The oranges greatly affects the skin, especially if you're brown skinned. Oranges and reds are going to affect your skin a lot. I wanted to make it a little bit less red, so I'm turning it towards the yellow side on the right. We don't really have any aquas, but we do have blues, especially the LED lights in the background. The blues and purples are greatly affecting the LED lights. This pretty much just made it more vibrant. It didn't really change the color too much. We have magenta is mainly in the lips. And now split toning is also really cool too. You can adjust the hue of the highlights and the shadows. With the highlights, since we're getting a fluorescent lighting here, the highlights are already a little bit yellow. I'm going to make the highlights a bit purple. So I turn it to the extreme just to see how what the color of the main lighting would be. Blue actually looks pretty cool, so I'm just going to turn the saturation down so it's not as extreme, and this kind of takes out a little bit of that yellowy color. For the shadows, I kind of want the shadows to be more in purple. I already decided that, but push it to the extremes all the way to the right just so you can see what colors the shadows will be turning into. Once you find your tone that you like, I'm choosing purple, then you turn down the saturation a bit to make it a little bit less intense. Purple shadows are it for me, but that's good enough for me. I'm gonna press OK. Alright, and we are done with that. But I'm going to add an adjustment layer. Adjustment layers, there's many different kinds of adjustment layers. One day maybe I'll make a video explaining that, but there are tons of videos explaining what they are. Now I'm going to be using this color balance layer. The color balance layer helps change the hues in the midtones, highlights, and the shadows. This gives you a little bit more control over how the color is being displayed. It always starts you with the midtones. I'll be making those midtones a little. I think I'm not gonna make it too warm, but just a tiny bit more warm. I'm gonna add some cyans in there to reduce the reds. It also helps reduce a little bit of the saturation as well. It kind of neutralizes the image. I'm gonna go to the shadows, and I kind of want the shadows to be a little bit more blue, but adding a dark blue makes it a little bit darker, so I'm gonna instead add some cyan to the shadows just to remove some of the pink just a little bit. And after that, I'm gonna go to highlights. The highlights, I'm just pushing it slightly towards purple. Toggling the layer helps me see what changes are made. I think I'm very happy with how this looks. Alright, now I'm going to start adjusting the color of smaller areas like the lips. So the first thing that I'm going to do is select the lasso tool, and I'm going to use the lasso tool to select an area that I want the adjustment layer to affect. So I'm going to start with the lips. I'm going to select the lip color by drawing around it, and then I'm going to go to the adjustment layers at the bottom right, click on color balance, and you're going to see a black square here instead of a white square, and you're going to see a little dot there. That's going to be where we selected. So the adjustment layer is only going to select inside that shape. So now when we change the sliders, you'll see that it only affects inside the lips, or the areas that we selected, the lip area that we selected. All right, I'm just gonna make it a little bit more pink, push the magentas and the midtones, push the reds in the midtones. And I'm just gonna do this to my liking. I'm gonna adjust the highlights a little bit too. I don't really want the teeth to be selected, so instead of selecting the teeth, I'm going to just paint in the mask to cover the teeth. Now you can't really see the mask, so you can press the backslash button to actually see a red filter to show where the mask is being affected. So wherever it's red, that shows where the layer or the adjustment layer isn't affecting. Wherever there is no red, that means the adjustment layer is affecting that area. So I'm going to swap my color to black, and I'm going to paint inside the teeth area. I'm going to paint inside the tooth area right here so that the mask isn't affecting the teeth. Make sure you're using black because that masks out the area that you select. I'm just gonna mask out the edges just a little bit so that there's like a smooth gradient, so that's not just like too pink all over. Alright, I like how that looks. I'm gonna label the layer lips just so that I don't get confused. I'm also going to use this same adjustment layer to add some rosiness to the cheeks. I used mainly the pinks in the midtone, so I'm going to switch my brush color to white so I can paint in some of that pink color. So just using a light opacity brush, I'm just slowly and gradually building up pink. That paint's just a little bit around the nose. Alright, I like how that looks. I'm gonna add another color balance layer, and this I really just want to affect the eyeshadow. She has kind of like a rusty brown. I just want to push some of those reds, so I'm gonna add some more reds in the shadows and in the midtones, like so. And I don't want it to affect the whole image, so I'm gonna label this layer, and I'm gonna label eyeshadow, and I'm going to switch my tool to the paint bucket tool. Drop black paint color inside of the image, so now you can see that everything is masked out. Now I'm going to take the airbrush tool, switch the color to white, and I'm going to paint in just a little bit of that red by using a very low opacity. And there, the eyeshadow looks a little bit more red now. Alright, now I'm going to use a curves layer. Alright, so after you've added the curves layer, take a look at the graph here. You can use brightness and contrast for this step instead. I just like to use curves. If you take a look at the graph, there is a big dip and then a high point in the middle of the graph. That high point is showing you where the brightness, where the bright tones are located, and that also is going to affect the face. So what I'm going to do is grab that point of the graph, grab that point of the line on top of the graph and pull it down just a little bit to darken the brights just by a smidge. Alright, and I only want to affect the face, so what I'm going to do is use a layer mask. I will click the white box on the adjustment layer, and I will switch to the paint bucket tool by pressing G, and then I will swap my foreground color to black. You could press X to do that, and then I will tap on the image to fill the layer with the mask. Then I'm going to switch to my paintbrush tool. I'm going to adjust the size and the opacity. About 62% is what I like, and I will switch to a white foreground color so that I can paint in the mask. And so after switching to white, I will slowly just build up the mask so that it's only affecting the face. Alright, and it's a little hard to see the difference right away. Sorry about my mouse moving kind of awkwardly. I will be pressing the / button on my keyboard so that I can enable the red filter over the image to help me see what parts of the image are masked out. And here we can see that most of the face is masked in. But I do want to cover all the areas of the hair, so I'm just going to swap back to the black foreground color, and using the paintbrush I'm just going to paint around the face, covering the hair, just trying to get close to the jawline. I don't want to affect the neck or any parts of the face. You could toggle the layer to see the difference, and I'm satisfied with that. Sometimes bright lighting can wash out the face a little bit. And so now skin tone looks a bit more even all over the body. So I'll add an adjustment layer, a vibrance adjustment layer, and that makes the colors pop a little bit more. Then I'm going to group all the adjustment layers by selecting them all and then pressing the group button at the bottom right. I decided to just group all the layers besides the background layer, and then I decided to duplicate this group. I merged it so that it could be one flat layer. Now I'm going to be doing some destructive edits here using the dodge and burn tool. You should probably do this before you get to doing color correction, but I just forgot to do this, so I'm doing it at the end. Taking the burn tool actually by pressing O, or by pressing it on your menu. I'm going to adjust the size of this brush, the exposure. I like to keep it fairly low. And I am going to be darkening the eyeliner by a little bit. There are just a few little spots where I see skin peeking through. So the burn tool darkens the areas that you drag the tool across. I like doing this to darken eyeliner, especially if my eyeliner is a bit too glossy. You can also do this to any other parts of the image. Alright, and I'm good with that. The eyeliner, you probably can't see too much of a difference, but it makes a difference to me. Next, I will be converting this layer, this rasterized layer, labeled flat. I'm going to convert that into a smart object. And then I'm going to add in a smart, and it's going to be the smart sharpen. This will help reduce any blurriness or lens blur. Whenever you take selfies, there's always going to be a small amount of lens blur just because of shakiness. This helps reduce that, and it makes the image look a little bit more crisp. Always keep it at lens blur. I don't mess too much with the shadows and highlights option there. That can complicate things. The amount sets the amount of sharpening. When you increase it to a higher value, the contrast between the edges and when you increase the radius, the wider the edge effects and the more obvious the sharpening. And reduce noise just helps reduce unwanted noise. And then sometimes I'll also add an unsharp mask to make the eyes and the hair pop a little bit more. This is not completely necessary, but I like adding this. It's just a nice little touch. It's also really great for sparkly makeup. Now after adding these filters, I spend a lot of time just adjusting it so that it doesn't look too wonky. After exporting the image from Photoshop, oftentimes I will send the image to my phone or whatever mobile device I'm using. Every now and then I will go into Photoshop Express and I will do a couple more edits. This isn't 100% necessary, but sometimes I find that images might need a little bit more tweaking once I transfer the image to my phone. So here's a screen recording of what I do on my phone. I turn down the clarity, and I also turn up the sharpness here. Turning down the clarity adds a little bit of a smoothness to the image. It smooths out the skin too. This is basically what I do, but you can make more adjustments to your liking. I like to use Photoshop Express but you don't have to use Photoshop Express. Your onboard camera editing software on your phone should work just fine. Or you can use the Instagram or Twitter adjustments, and that'll work great too. I just prefer using Photoshop Express. I also like adding these beta features here, light leaks, bokeh, and I'm just testing each filter here. I always turn down the opacity pretty low so that it doesn't really obscure the image, but sometimes it adds a nice touch. And now we can save. Here we are. This is the beautiful Whimsy. Go ahead and give her a follow on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch to get more stunning looks and to get some really hilarious gameplay. She's an amazing streamer. And thank you for letting me edit your photo. That's all for this photo. It's a lot of steps. You don't have to do everything that I did. This is just how I go about editing photos. Next, I might upload a video of how I edit my, I don't do this for every photo, but I do this for a majority of my pictures. And it helps increase the quality of my images too. For anyone who has asked me how I get my photos to look high quality, this is how. Yeah, let me know if you want to see me work on more of my photos. I did record this look as well. It's good to work from photos that are high resolution. Most phones shoot at high quality, so most folks don't really have an issue. You don't have to use a DSLR to get a nice looking image, especially with the phones that we have today. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll put out some more tips soon.